talking about the 4 cash flow quadrants today. Continuing our discussion of the 4 cash flow quadrants. All right, so let me put that banner up. Create another banner. All right, Wealth Talk Tuesdays, 4 quadrants. All right, baby. All right. Get that in there. Okay. All right. What's up? What's up? IG, talk to me. What you got going on? All right, we are live on Facebook. Give it a couple minutes. So again, Wealth Talk Tuesdays is one of the ways that I can kind of just share, knowledge and information with what I like to say or call, first generation wealth builders. And by first generation builders, I'm talking about, anyone who is trying to achieve, financial freedom for the first time in their family, who is trying to build out, a substantial wealth profile or wealth portfolio or financial portfolio, and be the first one families to do it, right? Like traditionally, we always talk about, the first generation when it comes to college and getting a college degree. Rarely do we talk about the first generation to, actually build wealth for the family. And just as important as being the first to go to college is just as much, if not even more so, important that we have that first generation wealth builder in the family. Because when you have that first, whether it be for the family, whether it be for the culture, that first gives everyone in the community, everyone in this area, everyone that's attached to that person's life, it gives them the vantage point to see that something can be done without regard for challenges, without regard for race, without regard for, where you started. When someone is the first to do something, it sets an example and it makes things tangible. It makes things real for the people who are around and who are connected to that individual. So when we talk about, that first generation college degree, it's important because now it shows other people in the family that you can get that education, right? And that education can open doors for you. What's up? What's up? Education can open doors for you. It can allow you access to, good jobs and benefits and all that good stuff. Well, when you think about the first generation wealth builder and the person who builds a substantial wealth or a substantial investment portfolio, who actually achieves financial freedom, well, now talking about changing the entire financial landscape and the perspective of what people think is possible for everyone around them. And arguably, and I know there are a lot of people who, certainly would disagree with me. I'm not going to choose one side of the fence just yet, but arguably having the financial know-how and wherewithal is and can be more powerful than having the educational wherewithal and the know-how, because there are a lot of, college educated people who don't have anyone, who never achieve, financial freedom and who do not have substantial investment portfolios. But we can get into that discussion at a later time. Let me check out these comments. What's up, DeVoe? All right, so today is a continuation Wealth Tuesdays for everybody just logging on. Wealth Talk Tuesdays is an opportunity for me to just share knowledge and information as it pertains to the journey and the process and the experience of starting literally from nothing, right? Starting from the bottom of the economic ladder, starting from the bottom a social economic ladder and making the journey all the way to the top, right? So that journey looks like you literally have nothing. You have no resources, you have limited or no education, you have no social network, you have no knowledge or firsthand experience or secondhand experience of the principles and the foundations, the thoughts, the theories, the ideas of how to, navigate through life, making that journey all the way to achieving, financial freedom, achieving social status. We can talk about social status and economic status and, how those two, tie in together. But there's a journey from the bottom. People coin the term, coming up from the mud, right? I came up from the mud to now I've achieved this. There's a process that goes along with that. And so with Wealth Talk Tuesdays, my goal and my hope is to just kind of share some of those thoughts and some of those ideas, some of those philosophies, because before you can actually manifest, the wealth, the social status, before you can manifest anything in reality, you first have to be able to, conceptualize it and understand it mentally. And so there has to be a renewal, a re-education. There has to be a refreshing, educating of the human mind to so that what to be aware of, what to look out for, and most importantly, how to take the patient and actually use it. So that's what Wealth Talk Tuesdays is about. Now today we're talking about the 4 cash flow quadrants. All right, we're talking about the 4 cash flow quadrants. Now before I start going a little bit deeper, just do me a favor. If you're watching this, especially if you're watching this on Facebook, do and share the video. I want to try to reach as many people as possible. So just do me that favor, share the share the video. And of course the video will be up long after the presentation, so you can come back to it. I want this information to be a resource. Anything good and anything lasting, like this information, is timeless. The beauty is about certain aspects of education, like financial education, is timeless. These principles and these foundations are not going to change. The difficulty is going to be in the obtaining of the information, the mastery of the information, and then the application of the information. So I'll let you know, Kayla. Hey, Kayla, I wish I knew about this system when we were doing our Health is Wealth week, because I can do a dual screen. We could have both been on the screen together and it would have been a lot cleaner. But I'll let you know in a second. I'll type it in the comments, or I'll shoot you a message. But it's called StreamYard. StreamYard.com. They have a paid version and a free version. All right, so that's if you're watching me on Facebook, one of my friends was just asking what system am I using to stream. So anyway, last week we started the conversation about the 4 cash flow quadrants, and the 4 cash flow quadrants are essentially a summary or a synopsis of the 4 ways in which you can generate income. All right, so to go over the cash flow quadrant again, right, this would be the left hand side. On your right, the left hand side, in one corner you have the E quadrant, which we'll cover a little more in detail today. Below that, you have the S quadrant, you have the B quadrant, and you have the I quadrant. The E quadrant stands for entrepreneur, all right? Or no, I'm sorry, not entrepreneur, employee. The E quadrant stands for employee. The S quadrant stands for small business owner. The B quadrant stands for business owner. And the I quadrant stands for investor. All right, so just looking at quadrant, if you've ever heard of Robert Kiyosaki, you've heard of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, this is where the cash flow quadrant comes from. And I'm telling you, if someone sat me down at 5, at 10 years old, at 15 years old, and explained the simplicity of the cash flow quadrant to me, I may have made different decisions, but luckily I've made, some good decisions along the way. And so, I've been able to gain good experience in the cash flow quadrant. But the E quadrant stands for employee. Now, how does the cash flow quadrant come into play when we're talking about, building wealth? We're talking about obtaining financial freedom. Again, it's describing the 4 different areas where you can generate income in your life. As an employee, how do you generate income as an employee? You generate that income primarily by going to work, working, earning a paycheck, taking home that paycheck, and then that paycheck your source of income, right? Under the S quadrant, the small business quadrant, that means you started a business yourself. You're a sole proprietor. You're a small business owner. You may have, 1, 2, 3 people working for you, whatever the case may be. And then you are paid, or you're paying yourself through the earnings of the business. The business owner, they're generating their revenue, their cash flow, right? The cash flow you use to spend, to buy your car, to pay your gas, to put food on the table. The business owner is a step up from the small business owner because they've created some type of system where they're able to own this enterprise, able to own this business, and then they have the ability to have other people work the system so that they don't have to physically actually do the work in order to obtain the revenue for the business and ultimately to pay themselves. And then the I quadrant, the investor quadrant, they receive their cash flow, their monthly money that they use to pay for their lifestyle. They receive their money from their investments, and their investments are producing money, and the money that their investments are producing is how they generate their cash flow. Now, from a mentality standpoint, from a mental standpoint, right? Vast majority of people start off and never leave the E quadrant. Again, that's that employee quadrant. Now, there's no one telling you that you have to stay in one quadrant. You can be in all 4 quadrants all at the same time. But what people from being in any other sector, right, of the quadrant other than the E quadrant is because they have a lack of knowledge, they have a lack of information, they have a lack of understanding about the other quadrants, or they aren't willing to take the risk that is involved to participate in the S and the B and the I quadrant. Now, I mentioned risk, so I'll come back to that. I was going to cover that a little bit later. But one of the challenges of strictly being in the E quadrant, that employee quadrant, people primarily now solely and strictly to the E quadrant because it provides a very high level of security. What's up? What's up? It provides a very high level of security, right? When you hear the term job security, that means it is literally providing you with a secure, and it's providing you with a stable and predictable level of income. And so what happens is, right, people who typically don't come from a wealthy background, don't come from a very affluent background, even certain levels of affluency, the primary objective and what we're told to do is, hey, go to school, graduate from high school, go to college, graduate from college, and get a good job, right? Get a job so you can have job security, you can have benefits, right? You can have that secure blanket that I navigate through life with. Now, I'm not going to, now that I'm older, I'm not going to talk too much about being, solely having that job security because it's important and it provides a lot of benefits. But when you stop strictly at the employee segment of the quadrant, then that's where you create a situation where that security has become so overwhelming, and you've married that emotion and that feeling of security so much, you no longer are willing or are capable of taking risk. And if you aren't willing to take risk, then you will be able to graduate into the S quadrant, the B quadrant, or the I quadrant, because all 3 of those quadrants involve some level or some degree of risk. Okay, so think about this as a 4-year degree, and each year you're graduating to a new level, right? It's going to take more than 4 years to get that knowledge and that information, but graduating, if you want to graduate from the E quadrant to the S quadrant, you're going to have to start to adopt a mentality where you're willing to take on more risk. If you want to graduate from the S quadrant to the B quadrant, you have to be willing to take on more risk. If you want to graduate from the B to the I, you certainly have to be willing to take on more risk. but risk is calculated, especially as you start to elevate from the E to the I. There are ways to calculate risk so that you reduce the amount of risk to ensure a solid outcome. But anyway, being in that E quadrant, another limiting problem with being strictly in the E quadrant, the employee quadrant, is because you limit yourself to one source of income. Not only are you limiting yourself to one source of income, you're limiting yourself to a mindset where you accept one source of income as the reality for how revenue is produced, right? If you look around you, how many people do you know, right? People have like 2 jobs, right? They'll have 3 jobs, but still they have one paycheck from one employer, and they aren't creating a situation where they have the ability to leverage their time and their energy. And so when you are strictly in the employee segment, you are literally trading your time and your energy for money. There is no leverage there. And so when you get into the small business, the business and the investor component, there's another conversation where we talk about leverage and being able to leverage these tools and these resources to produce revenue so that you don't have to work harder in order to earn more money. When you're strictly in the E quadrant, the only way that you are going to earn more money is if you work harder. You're either going to work harder by taking on a second, a third, or a fourth job, or you're going to have to work harder because you're trying to climb that ladder so that you can get that pay raise, which is another limiting reality when you're strictly in the E quadrant. You have very little control over your income unless you are in a sales position. And the vast majority of people are not in sales positions because that requires another level of risk. And typically when people are in sales positions, they have a mindset and a mentality that would allow them to jump into the S quadrant or the B quadrant or the I quadrant, because it takes a lot of the same mental principle, a lot of the same mentality to be able to operate at a risk level where your income as a salesperson is dependent upon commission to some degree, whether 100%, 50%, 25%. And so your income isn't guaranteed. And so there's an additional layer of insecurity in terms of whether or not you're going to the money that you plan to make. So again, just to recap some of the things we talked about being in, when you're an employee, you have a lower risk profile, often not willing to take any risk at all. You're tied to a single source of income. The only way to increase your income is if you're harder, again, by working harder, by getting more jobs, or working harder on the job that you have. You have limited control over increasing your income. And then when you do increase your income, typically people's raises are very meager. They're 1%, 2%. If you're on an hourly job, you might get a raise of 25 cents or 50 cents or $1 per hour. So it's not really that substantial. And when you start to look at it, if I'm making 50,000 a year, 60,000 a year, 100,000 a year, 200,000 a year, whatever that amount is, if you stretch that out over years, over 15 years, over 20 years, you'll see that it becomes increasingly difficult for you to actually live the lifestyle that you want to live, to experience life how you want to live it. It's not to say that you can't take care of yourself. It's not to say that you can't put a roof over your head, right? But it limits the experience that you're going to have in life, and then it prevents you from being able to develop and grow into other skill sets that you would actually obtain by graduating into the S quadrant, into the B quadrant, and into the investor quadrant, because all four of these quadrants requires a different skill set. It requires a different mentality. It requires a different level of awareness. It requires a different level of execution. So if you stay right here, you're never going to be able to adopt the skill sets needed to get into the B. Let's see some other things. Where am I at time-wise? I'm at 20 minutes. All right, a lot longer than I wanted to go, but I guess some things you get It's going to take what it's going to take. All right. So some other characteristics of being in that I quadrant. In terms of trying to find that next level in your life, you spend time, jumping to the next job because you're trying to fulfill some emotions, some feeling, some gaping hole in your life, when probably the answer is really finding more, digging deeper into yourself to find your passion and to pursue passion, which you aren't able to do if you are committed to a job and all of your time is being accounted for and is being controlled and dictated by someone else. Now, it's better, you don't have to, if you feel comfortable being in the E quadrant, and there's a period of time where you're going to be in the E quadrant, and you may stay in the E quadrant. Some people stay in the E quadrant and then they move to the S quadrant, or they move to the I quadrant. The E quadrant and the I quadrant are good, work well together, because you can earn a steady paycheck from one avenue and learn to invest that money in another avenue. But you can be in one quadrant and graduate to another, but it's going to require that you actually start to take the steps to actually do that. So one of the things I want to talk about is actually making the step from the E quadrant to the S quadrant. That S quadrant being a small business owner. You can have a full-time job and still own a business, right? There are 186, 187 hours in a week, and most full-time jobs are only going to take you for 40 hours to 50 hours a week. You start a small business, right? First, by educating yourself. If you want a good resource on business, on small business, go to the SBA.gov, the Small Business Administration.gov. They have a ton of free information about starting a business. The first key is educating yourself on entrepreneurship and learning to adopt a mindset and a mentality where you believe that your talents, your worth is more than what you're being paid on your job. And that's another limiting problem with strictly being a quadrant. If you go to work at whatever job you make, wherever you work, if that's your only source of income, you are going to start to correlate your self-worth with the amount of money that you're making. And so if you're making $50,000 a year, or you're making $20,000 a year, you're going to believe, you're going to start to live, you're going to start to think that your life, your skill set, what you bring to the table is only worth $20,000 or $50,000 or $100,000. Now, your particular skill set at that moment in time, as it relates to that job, may dictate $1,000, $50,000, or $100,000, but that doesn't mean that's what you're always going to be worth, right? But we adopt this mindset of, this is what I'm worth, this is what my skill set is worth, and my life cannot produce additional income or additional revenue, and that the case. And so what happens is, as you adopt that mentality, you also adopt that lifestyle. And that lifestyle is, I go to work, I come home, and I spend my free time however I want to spend it, right? The average American, and this is mind-boggling to me, right? It's boggling. I remember reading about this. I check on this every few years, but the average American literally spends like 6 to 8 hours watching TV, 6 to 8 hours a day watching TV. And it's like, how can you spend 6 to 8 hours a day watching TV? Now it's the TV and the internet, but how could you spend that much time watching TV? Well, if you think about it, people literally get up, they go to work, they come home, and they turn on the TV, right? Because now you have a source of income, it's secure, you're comfortable, that you think this is all I'm going to make, and you're not trying to get to that S quadrant, that B quadrant, that I quadrant, so you are not utilizing your free time as well as you can. You are not investing your time. That's the proper term. You're spending your time, but you're not investing your time. Spending your time is sitting on a couch and just watching TV. Spending your time is just talking on the phone and gossiping, right? There's no return on investment, that time, spending your time is going out to happy hour and getting drunk and coming home, passing out and getting up for work, the next day, and then doing the same thing on the weekend. That's spending your time. How do you spend your time? But if you are investing your time, right? You're investing your time. That looks different because now trying to get a return on our investment. So I didn't want to go here, but we'll get a little deep, right? Now we're talking about taking, time and taking energy and then converting time and energy to dollars, right? How do you convert time and energy to dollars? Is something that you're going to have to really understand if you are going to become a small business owner, a business owner, or an investor. You literally are taking your time, the time that you're given, the 24 hours that you're giving, and you're taking that time, you're investing that time in acquiring the knowledge, the information, and the skill so that you can graduate skill-wise into a new arena, right? The small business arena. We'll stick with small business. So first I start off with educating myself. Now I've decided that, hey, I want to start a small business. There are a lot of different things you could do. You could do something as simple as going to the flea market every weekend, telling your favorite recipe and making $100 on Saturday and $100 on Sunday, right? You can make custom-made jewelry and sell that. It's not in the amount of money that you're making at that particular time. What's more valuable is the acquisition of the knowledge, the acquisition of the information, acquisition of the experience. And then over time, because you're committed to figuring this thing out, over time, you can graduate and you can elevate because you're now building up this skill set. You're now building up this perspective and this understanding that will allow you to increase your confidence and your competency. So now you've taken that time, you've invested that time, you started to utilize that time, and now that time is producing a return on investment through actual dollars. The challenge becomes, how do I take all of this skill set? How do I take this hustle? How do I take this business? And how do I grow it? How do I elevate it to the next level? So now we are investing our time looking for a return on our investment, right? Going to happy hour is not going to give you a return on your investment unless you're learning how to run a restaurant or a bar, and you're investing that time checking out the operations, meeting people, right? Like, you can spend your time and you can invest it at the same time, but you have to have the mindset and the mentality to know where it is you are trying to go. So I'll leave it at graduating from the E quadrant to the S quadrant. Again, small business ownership. You could start an ice cream truck, something that you've been passionate about, something you've been thinking about, something that is low cost, so you don't invest a lot of money. It doesn't make sense to go out and invest a lot of money if you don't have any business skills, any business experience, any entrepreneurship experience, right? Excuse me. Go out and spend a little bit of money, test the waters, and start to grow your confidence and your mindset and your mentality, right? If you want to jump from the E to the I, then you have to start to learn about investing. Now, you may have a 401k and you're investing money, but that's not the same as investing under the I quadrant. So you have to learn how to actively invest to produce the offset and revenue that's going to come from your investments. So we can talk about that when we get to the I quadrant. But today I just wanted to focus on the E quadrant. So I certainly have talked a lot longer than I had planned to. We're running up on 28 minutes, but I appreciate you all for logging on. Today is Wealth Talk Tuesdays. I'm going to do these Wealth Talks every Tuesday. It's just, again, trying to drop knowledge and education as at what little bit I know. I'm not the most intelligent. I'm not the most successful. I'm not the most experienced, but I know where I am on that pendulum, and so whatever I can do to kind of help other people along on that journey is what I'm going to do. And I hope that you all join me in that journey so that we can change the dynamics of our families, we can change the dynamics of our destiny, and we can take control over our life and be the one in control in dictating the terms and not allowing other people to dictate the terms for us. And then it's not just about us, but it's about empowering and educating the next generation, right? I started this off, I talked about this is particularly for first generation wealth builders. The task at hand for you as a first generation wealth builder is your task is to get the information, to apply the information, to be successful in the information in the application, and show people there's a different way so that they can educate and empower themselves to achieve financial freedom, to achieve accumulating a significant investment portfolio, so that we no longer are slaves to the system, but we are free and sovereign individuals. All right. So I appreciate y'all for logging on. Again, share this video. It'll be up. So I hope that you're back. I hope to see you next Tuesday. Also, this Thursday at 6 p.m., I'm doing a 10-year vision party, again, through Facebook Live and Instagram Live. We're going to look at the next 10 years, because right now, the next 10 years is going to make or break a lot of people. And there's an opportunity, a significant opportunity for wealth to be achieved. If I knew what I know now 10 years ago, I could easily tell you, just as I'm going to tell you now, I can make anyone a millionaire in 10 years. It's all about the information and the application of that information. So it takes time to get it. But in this next 10 years, there are people who are going to lay the groundwork to become millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires, multi-billionaires. And there are people who are going to, quite frankly, who are going to lose and who are going to do the work. They are going to spend their time and they're not going to invest their time. So I implore you, this 10-year stretch is going to be worse than the last 10-year stretch in terms of the separation and the redistribution of wealth in America and wealth around the world. So it is imperative that you make a conscious decision to decide where are you going to fall on the pendulum over the next 10 years. So that's what Thursday is about. We're taking a look at the next 10 years, and we're going to start to chart a trajectory and decide where do we want to end up in the next 10 years, so that we can how we are going to get there, rather than just spending our time and hoping for the best. So I'll see you Thursday at 6 p.m. Again, I appreciate y'all for logging on. It's always good connecting with y'all and sharing with you all. I love you all. Peace.